Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Mark Hofmann was a successful document dealer in the 1980s. So why did he kill? Forensic expert George Throckmorton will tell us more of his insights in our next conversation. I hope you check it out. I also want to remind everybody we're coming up here on July 17th. We're going to have our Gospel Tangents Insiders Club. We've still got a few spots left, so please go to tinyurl.com/GTinsider so that you can sign up to talk to me. It's going to be July 17th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So we've still got a few slots left. If it fills up, we'll be able to accommodate as many people as possible. So register today so you can do that. Now back to our conversation. So why do you think Mark killed? I believe that when we were talking on the phone, it seems like you said that Mark said that Steve Christensen was his best friend and that he killed his best friend. Why do you think that was?
Yes, I'll explain it. Now realize if you talk to various investigators, they have their own theory, and they do. Each investigator kind of has their theory. My particular theory, along with one of the attorneys, came to being because of the investigation we did. They couldn't convince us of their theory. It didn't hold water. And a couple of others have bought onto this too, but ours seems most logical. And it involved not only the examination of the documents, but I went out with this other attorney 2 or 3 times to question other people. And then as you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, ours forms the most perfect picture, in my opinion. And here's the way it went. And first of all, the oath of a free man. The oath of a freeman is supposed to be the first printed document in the colonies. The Massachusetts Bay colonies wanted to get a printing press here, so they ordered one from England to come over on the boat. While it was coming over, they met together in the city council and they said, what should be the first document to come off the printing press when it gets here? And this was discussed. Historically, these are the records we have, and there's 4 different versions of what the oath said, but they all basically said the same thing. In order to be a free man, and of course this is the land of the free, and this is why it's so significant, you had to belong to a church, you had to be married, and you had to own a house. If you could do that, you were then allowed to vote. And so if you met those qualifications, you could go down and be sworn in or take the oath of a free man, and that would allow you the opportunity to vote. Hofmann, we know, heard that a firm by the name of Schiller and Wapner in New York was looking for the oath. They had advertised in magazines. And this is what we believe happened. Mark flew back to New York and researched it. What should be the contents? And he took these 4 versions and made his own. And then he came back to Salt Lake and he did we call it a cut and paste. He had made Xerox copies of the type style that was used to print documents back then. And it was different than it is today. And he made it say the words he wanted to say. He took a picture of it and then he had a plate made, a printing plate. And so he had what he was going to consider was the oath of a freeman. But because it would be so valuable, he made another document, and he called it the oath of a freeman. And it was a poem. We don't know what it really was, but it said oath of a freeman. He took this oath of a freeman back to New York, went in a bookstore, an old bookstore, went in the back, wasted about an hour looking through things, came up and he made purchases of 4 or 5 documents. And he made certain that the cash register wrote on the receipt what the name of these documents were. This is not normal, but he made sure he did it. And one of them was the oath of a freeman. He then flew back to Salt Lake. He got off the plane. He come back and he took this oath that he actually smuggled into the store and then bought. He brought it back. He left it here. He got the oath that he had prepared. He now flies back to New York and he goes to Schiller and Wapner's. He pretends he's an excellent white-collar criminal. He pretends to be stupid. He pretends to be the hick from Utah. And I've said it many times, and this is my own feelings. I says I wouldn't be surprised if he had some cow manure on the bottom of his shoes just to convince him how stupid he was. But he walks in and he says, I bought this document over at this bookstore over here, and he holds it up and he pretends to have no idea what it is. And as they looked at it, they immediately knew what it was because they've been advertising, looking for it. And so he pretends to be stupid and dumb and all this other stuff. How dumb he was, he walked out of that store with a $60,000 check in his pocket. That $60,000 check gave Schiller and Wapner the right to sell his document for over $1 million. If they sold it less than $1 million, he would get all of the proceeds. In order for them to make anything, they had to sell it for more than $1 million. They gave him $60,000 for that right. So he walks out with $60,000. They have that, and they're assured they can sell it for $1.5 million. It would be the first document in the colonies, that, especially showing that it's freedom. They expected it to be on display next to the Declaration of Independence. So he gets back and he starts a big spending spree. He's got a lot of money now. He gets him a new house. He gets him a new car. He pays cash for his car and a bunch of other stuff. He knows he's getting this $1 million back here, at least $500,000, because they won't sell it unless he's getting $500,000. So anyway, and then he thought, boy, that's good. So now he decides, I'm going to do it again. So he makes a second oath of a freeman. He actually made a third, which he was trying to sell then in Brazil. But I don't know how many people know that. The second one he sells to somebody up in Idaho. And I'm not going to describe him. I know it would be interesting, but if I describe him, there might be a lot of people that know who it is. Okay? But there's a fellow up in Idaho, and he sells it to him for $100,000. And as time progresses, the oath back in New York isn't selling as quickly as they thought. The American Antiquarian Society, the Library of Congress, they wanted it, but they didn't want to pay over $1 million. They was only going to pay $750,000 for it. And they had it authenticated as far as they could, and they so forth and etc. So the sale is being delayed quite a bit, several months. But he still knows it's coming in. So that's why he sells this one. He gets $100,000. And then later on, the person up in Idaho, he sees where they got the Oath of a Freeman back in New York, and they're selling it. And he says, this isn't an original that I purchased. Hofmann told me it was an original. So he calls him on the phone and says, this isn't an original. He actually meets with him. Says, this is not an original document. It's not worth $100,000. I want my money back. Well, Mark doesn't have any money. And apparently an argument ensued or something, and Mark gets physically assaulted. And this is the first time in his life we know of that somebody actually physically assaulted him. Before, he's dealing with, what do they call him, Mr. Milquetoast. You know, historians are generally a laid-back, calm person. I don't know anybody other than a couple that holler to me, but most of them I don't think they do. And nobody had ever hit him before. He'd bounce checks on him. He would lie to him about documents. And it was well known he was like that, but they wanted to go back to him because he could provide the documents they wanted. He took orders for documents frequently and miraculously found them. And but anyway, this guy up in Idaho, he beat him up. Hofmann didn't know what to think. Nobody's ever hit him before. And he's a coward. That's why they bomb, because you don't have to be there when somebody gets injured. And so anyway, the guy says, I want my money back, and I want it next Monday or whatever it was. Now, what is he going to do? And this is speculative, but it seems to make sense from the bits of pieces of puzzle that we put together. He says, what can I do so he won't come after me and hit me anymore? And he's thinking, you know, if one of my best friends die, I'll have an excuse to go to his funeral and he won't come back. He'll give me a few days, and by then the oath will be sold back there. And in fact, I think it was the American Antiquarian Society was meeting to discuss purchasing it again on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. We know that because we saw the agenda for the meeting. And again, I don't know how many of the other investigators saw this, but we did. That's why this is another piece that we had that others did not. So that day of either Tuesday or Wednesday is crucial because that's when they're voting to buy it. And Schiller and Wapner convinced him they're going to buy it, so he knows he's going to get it. So he needs to postpone just a couple of days before this guy comes back and beats him up again. And so we found in his possession a 3x5 card that had 5 of his closest friends written, their names written on it in Mark's handwriting. And by the name of Steve Christensen was an asterisk. And we're assuming that he put the asterisk there. But anyway, so it was one of his 5 closest friends he had to kill so we could go to their funeral. The bombs came up. Steve Christensen was blown up. And of course, the second bomb was a diversionary thing for the police department, which they believed for several days that they were involved not in the Salamander letter, but involved in financial dealings down in Las Vegas. The irony of that is the news media didn't believe that. They kept putting Salamander letters. So what is Hofmann hearing about? That the police are investigating Las Vegas, or are they investigating the Salamander letter? All he sees is the Salamander letter, so he's a little concerned more. And then he gets the call from the guy, and he says, hey, you got to wait for a couple of days. My best friend got killed. I'm going to his funeral. He said, I don't care. I want my money back. And if you're not around, I'm coming after your family. Good old farmer. I love farmers. I'm an old farmer, as a kid. But anyway, so now the next phase is, what can I do so he won't come after me or my family? And he thought, if there's another bomb related to Salamander or historical documents, that'll give me excuse to say they're coming after me. And that's what he told his friends. And his friends were concerned about him too. And he lied to each one of the friends. If the friends could ever get together and hear what he had told everybody. And if you remind me about the hot tub, I'll tell you about that.
Ooh, yeah, we'll talk about that.
But anyway, so that's where he goes after Brent Ashworth, who's a well-known collector of historical documents. And if Brent gets blown up, then he'll have an excuse to leave town, Hofmann will. And that's why he was going after Brent. But then he accidentally blew up himself.
So didn't he have a good enough excuse? Because I talked with Kurt Bench, and Kurt said the first person he called after Steve Christensen was killed was Mark Hofmann, and said, Mark, you've got to be careful. There's a bomber out there, which is just so crazy to me.
See, I don't know whether Mark got the excuse because of people telling him you got to be careful, or what. And of course, Brent Ashworth left town too, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Which was a sad experience. But all of these people involved were leaving town. So if Mark left, that's nothing unusual.
Well, and Kurt said the next day when the third bomb went off that I think he said he was driving to work and he heard the news, or maybe it was a lunch break, I think it was, and he said he punched the steering wheel and said, Mark, you didn't be careful. You weren't careful.
Well, he wasn't. Unfortunately, he blew himself up instead of somebody else blowing him up. But the rumors were running so rampant at that time, and so it would be natural for Mark to leave town and hide. Others were doing it too. And so that way this guy from Idaho couldn't begrudge him. Everybody's leaving.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would make sense to me. I'm not a criminal, so maybe I don't think like a criminal, but if Brent Ashworth is leaving town and, Kurt's looking for bombs in his house, Shannon's checking his car for bombs, and, everybody was really concerned about this. Why wouldn't, and if Mark's concerned about this farmer from Idaho, why not just leave town unannounced? I mean, that would make sense to me, but...
No, you want him to know that you're gone, and that's why the guy's not coming down and beating up your family or whatever.
Well, because...
I'm hiding.
Yeah.
And I believe, and it's just my theory, I believe he would have called the guy up and says, hey, there's bombs going off. Many of us are leaving town, so I won't be able to get to you for at least a couple of days till things quiet down. That's my feeling.
Well, and the other thing that because it sounds like Mark was trying to make this a diversionary tactic. He killed Steve Christensen, and then I believe the second bomb was intended for Gary Sheets, but his wife picked it up and it killed her.
And realized it didn't matter. It was laying on the floor, on the ground out by the car. So if anybody, even if it didn't go off, if they found the bomb there, it would have connected the two together.
Right. So if he's going to bomb Brent Ashworth, because did Brent have anything to do with CFS and that financial deal?
Well, no, but she realized the news media didn't acknowledge CFS as one of the problems. Only the police department did.
Okay.
The newspapers were more hung up in Salamander than CFS, or whatever it is, CFS.
Yeah.
And so Hofmann doesn't know what the police are doing. He just knows what the newspapers are telling him they're doing.
Okay, so the newspapers are focusing on the Mormon forgeries. So that wasn't in the newspapers at all back then? That
CFS?
That it could have been a mafia hit or something?
Not,
I've heard
for
that.
a few days, no.
Okay.
They were hung up. I mean, what's more significant to read? Salamander or, bomb for mafia?
I don't know. Bomb for mafia sounds pretty good to me.
No, not in Utah. Salamander was very controversial.
Well, yeah.
And, of course, Steve Christensen, he was the one in charge of the Salamander letter, getting it authenticated and trying to sell it.
Well, and I know Kurt said that when he talked to Mark that day, he said that Mark was kind of like feeling Kurt out, like, what do the media know? And he says, well, Mark said it must have been a financial deal. And Kurt said, well, not necessarily, it could have been.
Oh, Mark said it must have been a financial.
Yeah.
Okay, that was his intent, but the news media didn't pick it up. And if you look at the newspapers at that time, it's all Salamander. There's a link between Christensen and Salamander.
Wow. So was Gary Sheets a collector too, or not really? He wasn't at all.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. That's just crazy. So this whole bombing thing was just a stall tactic for this farmer who was going to come beat him up?
That's what it seemed like. We know it was a stall factor because he wanted 2 days so they could meet on the contract back there. So the Antiquarian Society they were going to vote to buy it. And he knew that. And Schiller and Wapner assured him it would sell for over $1 million. So if he can put it off until the vote was on Wednesday, that would give him the excuse that he needed to stall for a little time.
Well, because he was also supposed to meet with the church officials the day of the third bomb about the McClellan collection.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe that?
No,
oh, really?
I don't. There were a lot of stories going around there. There were a lot of stories. I've heard them over the years. I'm not saying that's not true. Realize, I say, each investigator is working on different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard so many things that are rumors, and I've never heard them from the investigators. I've heard them from other people, and I never heard them from the church. And I dealt with them for quite a while. I'm not saying it wasn't going to happen. I says I don't know about it, so I can't effectively speak about it.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with George Throckmorton. In our next conversation, we'll talk about the document collection that Mark Hofmann was working on when that third bomb injured him. It has great ties to an old conspiracy theory about the Book of Mormon.
And it's a land deed that was all signed by Solomon Spaulding and Martin Harris. So it showed there was a relationship between Solomon Spaulding and Martin Harris. And the date was appropriate. And this is the document that Mark Hofmann showed Hugh Pinnick and Al Rust and some others, and he says, this is part of the McClellan collection.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.